The Secrets of Middle-earth is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
Hello everyone, you're listening to The Secrets of Middle-earth, where we discuss the hidden themes and deeper layers found in the works of J.R.R. Tolkien, whether in his writings or in any of the media derived from them. Today we're discussing Season 1 of Amazon Prime streaming series The Rings of Power. And joining me tonight are Jeff Haecker. Hi Jeff.
Hi Thomas.
And Kaitlyn Facista. Hello Kaitlyn.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Okay, so the captain of our fellowship, Thomas Sanjurjo, unfortunately couldn't join us this week. He's feeling a bit under the weather, but we're looking forward to having him back soon because we have a lot of fun Tolkien topics to discuss in the future. And be sure to follow The Secrets of Middle-earth in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or any other podcast app. You can find us on social media at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or on Twitter where we are at SQPN, or on Instagram where we are at StarQuest Network. And do us a favor, please, and help get the word out about Secrets of Middle-earth by sharing the show with all your friends. This is especially important as we're transitioning to a new monthly release schedule, because there's a lot of great Middle-earth content out there. But as a show that explores Tolkien's legendarium and its adaptations from a specifically Catholic perspective, I think this podcast has a very unique and special voice. So if you know any other Tolkien fans who'd be interested in our discussions, please let them know about the Secrets of Middle-earth. And before we dive right into our discussion of Season 1, I just want to get a little bit of listener feedback in. This one was interesting. Paul Leone on YouTube writes, "Great overview of the season finale. I really enjoyed listening to your thoughts. I guess I was wrong about Halbrand being king of the Oathbreakers. Oops." And Paul, I think we were all wrong about that one.
I know.
Anyway, Paul goes on, "As for Gandalf in the Second Age, in Lord of the Rings Online, there was a recent storyline where we find Gandalf was sent to Middle-earth in the Second Age in the form of an elf, and openly fought Sauron alongside the Noldor under Gil-galad. He eventually got captured by Sauron in the last years of the age and was tortured to death, after which the Valar took away his memory of the whole thing. I wonder if the show will do something like that, maybe not killing him, but having him sail west when Sauron is defeated." And I actually want to leave our thoughts on whether, Gandalf is in the show and what that might mean to later in our discussion. But I just wanted to ask you guys, speaking of Lord of the Ring video games, have either of you ever played any video games based on the Legendarium, or are you excited for some of the upcoming releases like the Gollum game or the Return to Moria game?
I'm not much of a gamer now, but I used to be, and I'm pretty sure I played some of the games that came out after the films came out back in the early 2000s. So I can't say I've played anything more recent. I'm a little bit familiar with some of them, and I think I've played some of those older games, but nothing more recent for me.
Yeah, I'm not really a gamer at all, but my kids have played the Lego Hobbit game, and I occasionally watch them play it. But I do think that the Gollum game and the new Return to Moria game look pretty interesting. But again, I think it would probably be like me watching my kids play, just because I'm not really into games.
Yeah, it's kind of the same with me. I've not played any of the previous games. I have seen my brother play through the Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War games, which we both had huge problems with because of a lot of the lore breaking things in that. In fact, more lore breaking than anything in this show, just in my opinion. But yeah, no, I'm really interested in the Gollum game. And at first I wasn't interested in Return to Moria, but then when I heard it takes place in the Fourth Age and it's about the refounding of the realm of Moria by Gimli and some of the other dwarves, that I thought was really interesting. And I'd be looking forward to getting my hands on that when it comes out.
Yeah, I think that'll be fun.
So yeah, let's dive right in. We have a lot to cover tonight. So I just want to get your guys' thoughts first on just the season as a whole, having viewed it again before this recording, did it hold up on a second viewing? You know, was there anything you liked more than you saw it the first time, or maybe even liked less? So, Kaitlyn, let's start with you. What's your overall thoughts on season 1 of The Rings of Power?
I actually enjoyed it a lot more watching it through the second time. I think I've seen the series maybe 4 times straight through now. Just because I've been sitting around a lot with the new baby and couldn't really get out of my chair. So why not watch The Rings of Power? But I think seeing it as a whole story, I've enjoyed it a lot more. It almost makes me wish that they would have done kind of like the Netflix style release where they dropped the whole thing at once. Even though it was really fun wondering and kind of going through this journey over the course of 7 weeks, it was very stressful too, because it just like after every episode, you know, you're like, what just happened? What's going on? Especially with the Mithril thing. But so seeing it as a whole, I enjoyed it a lot more. It was also very fun to go back and see every single little clue coming up with Halbrand. And I noticed them the first time around, but I was in denial, refused to believe it. Like every single, I feel like we talked about all of them. Like, you know, I got it off a dead man. I remember we specifically talked through that, and I felt like he was just kind of playing it off, but he really did get it off a dead man. Yeah. So going back and rewatching that, picking up on the little clues, I think it was more fun. And I actually think that my overall opinion of the series went up as I've rewatched it.
Yeah, that I kind of had a similar experience with the Halbrand stuff, where I was like, during the rewatch, I was like, okay, like it's funny how they crafted that everything he said that was suspicious could easily be explained away by fans as either misdirection or some kind of, you know, just other reference. And I was like, wow, I can't believe they basically hung it right in front of us with a few key lines. And we were all just like, nope, he's somebody else. He's the Oathbreaker. He's the Witch King. And yeah, I couldn't help but chuckle through the rewatch. I'm like, I can't believe they managed to do that. I know there were other people out there who were convinced from the beginning, but I was certainly not one of them. Jeff, what about you? What are your overall thoughts on season 1, having done a rewatch?
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it pretty much the first time around, except for a few things that I was maybe not as worried about them changing things from canon. Because as I've said, I'm a big fan of the Jackson films. I've seen those more than I've read Tolkien, so I'm okay with if they do things and change things that make sense. The Mithril thing still kind of okay, whatever. I'm not. That might be some of the weakest part of the season, but overall, I did really enjoy it, and I did enjoy rewatching, and I didn't get to fully rewatch every single minute, but I kind of would focus on the scenes of Halbrand and just to kind of listen to what he's saying and how he's relating and say, okay, is this, you know, should we have caught him there? And there's a few scenes that I'm still not sure of, like, okay, they like this. There was, my whole thing was the scene he was, when they were getting ready to leave Numenor, he was in a room by himself and like he was putting his knives and stuff away and was just kind of acting like Halbrand and not like Sauron. So that, in retrospect, I'm like, okay, that was a little bit of a, I mean, I guess they were trying to do misdirection, but it didn't really seem like it was, you know, it seemed like it just didn't really fit very well in that particular scene. But I mean, that's just nitpicking, a very small, small couple minutes. And, but yeah, no, I really have enjoyed the series, and I know it's going to be a long wait, till the next one, so I'm sure I'll rewatch it a couple more times in between. But yeah, no, I overall enjoyed it. I think all the performances and the acting are all really strong, and maybe some of the writing wasn't as strong, but I think overall just I really enjoyed it. Had a blast, and it'll be a while to wait, but yeah, I enjoyed the ride so far.
Yeah, I definitely want to agree with what you said about the acting. Almost all the acting in the show has been superb. Even when they're given sort of subpar material in terms of script, the actors are able to pull it off in a way that you buy it. Even when you're kind of just like, that line wasn't very good, but it was delivered so passionately, you know, like I just think all the acting is great. I especially want to spotlight, I'm terrible at remembering actors' names, but the fellow who plays Elrond.
Robert Aramayo.
Okay, thank you. He's probably my favorite performance in the whole show. There's just so much nuance with, he's able to get out every little emotion. He's so expressive. It was just like, and his scenes with Durin, their back and forth were just terrific. But all the acting across the board was just stellar. It's funny with me rewatching it. I enjoyed it the first time, and it's funny because I rarely rewatch shows anymore. I mean, there'll be a few shows that I watch over and over, like The Mandalorian, and I was worried that when I rewatched The Rings of Power, I'm like, oh, this isn't going to be something that I'm going to want to return to. But actually, I enjoyed it just as much on a second viewing. And in fact, some of the scenes that I didn't like the first time, not all of them, but a few, kind of grew on me. And I was thinking, just this could be a series I can see myself returning to, not infrequently. And to me, for me, that's the mark of a good show, where I just feel like immersing myself in that world again. And I think part of it is just that it's a Tolkien adaptation. So I'm going to keep returning to it. But at the same time, it's like those last two Hobbit movies I have not seen since I saw them in the theater. Like, yeah, I return to the first Hobbit movie every once in a while because I actually like that one. But like this show, I'm actually convinced I'm going to watch it again. In fact, I plan to do another rewatch quite soon. But yeah, I just think that's the mark, the overall mark of a good show. And speaking of scenes that may have worked, or the at least for me, worked more the second time around than the first time around, I want to get into some of the main storylines of this first season. There are four in particular. And the first one is, and this one will I'm sure be divisive among fans, and that's the Harfoots and the Stranger. And it's funny because these sequences actually worked for me better the second time around. The Harfoots really grew on me. Like, there's still some parts of it which was just weird, but I don't know. The genuineness of the performances and of those characters, and it just made me feel really invested in their story. Did either of you have a similar experience with the Harfoots, or are they still just kind of almost many people say they're a distraction from the main plot, which they kind of are, but
I really enjoyed, like you said, the actors. I think they all did a phenomenal job. I just feel like the Harfoot storyline wasn't something that spoke to me personally. And I understand how it fits in with the rest of the story. And I think they must be building up to something important happening in upcoming seasons. But it did feel like, for the most part, not much happened. We really just had Meteor Man, and he's kind of discovering who he is, and the Harfoots are helping him in that way, which I thought was sweet. But I mean, the props, the sets, the costuming, the acting, all of that was really, really good. It just wasn't a storyline that spoke to me or meant really anything to me. But I'm really happy for other people who like the Harfoots. I'm glad they're there for everyone else's sake.
No, yeah, I can see where it's definitely a thing that they felt, the showrunners felt, a Middle-earth property needs hobbits, or casual viewers won't understand why there's no hobbits in a Lord of the Rings series. So, but I feel like with that mandate, they did the best they could with, okay, we need to shoehorn hobbits into this. And I feel like it just could have been so much worse than it was. And at least with the sort of tail end of that story, when they've really gotten to know Meteor Man and they've kind of made friends with him. His relationship with Nori was what sold it for me. And just especially in those last couple episodes and when they're heading out in the season finale, I was just so reminded of the first Hobbit movie or some of the opening sequences of the Fellowship of the Ring that it just sort of hit a sweet spot of what I like about those about the Hobbit stuff from the books and from the Peter Jackson movies of, just these little people in a huge world that is completely, beyond they're about to go into this wide world that's beyond their experience and have this huge adventure and grow as characters. And I'm excited to see where Nori's adventure takes her in the future, though. But we'll leave that for our discussion of theories later. But what about you, Jeff? What do you think overall of the Harfoot sequences?
Yeah, so it wasn't my favorite storyline and still isn't. That doesn't mean I don't like it, but it's of the kind of the main ones. It was the one I kind of agree with Kaitlyn. It was the one I was kind of least invested in. But I did like it, and especially at the end, Sadik. I was just thinking of Sadik. Like he was a not really nice guy at the beginning, but he kind of they gave him a great send off.
Yeah.
And so that kind of endeared me to, because I'm always a big fan of a character going through, having an arc and not just staying stagnant. I want characters to evolve and change for good or worse, morally. So I was happy they kind of gave him and the other Harfoots as well to kind of expand them and not just be, we're stuck in our ways. And because that's going back to like the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, most of the Hobbits up until kind of the very end where they're where the Shire gets taken over, at least in the book, most of the Hobbits are like, everyone leave us alone, we'll leave them alone. And, nothing's ever going to change. And so I'm glad they kind of started an evolution of the Hobbits in that way, or of the Harfoots in that way a little bit. I am curious kind of where this is in. I'll kind of save speculation for the later, but I'm kind of curious I am very curious where Meteor Man and Nori are going to go, because I don't just want to see a storyline of them just wandering by themselves and not really doing much else. I want to kind of see them interact with people they meet along the way. So I'm hoping that we don't just get a whole season of them wandering and occasionally checking in with them and they're camping or meeting a traveler here or there, but I hope what they're doing actually will mean something, and not just to the end game of the show, but mean something. I hope they just kind of keep that meaningful as they progress in the story. But I did overall, like I said, I did enjoy the story. And it was kind of, at first it was kind of like, okay, let's get back to Numenor. Let's get back to I want to see the big things going on. But then looking back on it and watching it again, you're like, it was kind of nice to have those kind of little breaks here and there of like people just hanging out, eating and hiking and, that just kind of a nice little, and granted, and they do a lot more. They, fighting off the Sauron cultist or whatever we want to call him. So I did enjoy their storyline overall. Just, it still wasn't my favorite, but I did like it. And on a second watch, it did improve for me as well. So.
Yeah, definitely agree. It wasn't my favorite, but on a second watch through, I guess I just appreciated those sequences more, where instead of I think it was because I knew what was going to happen. So like, as you're watching the episode for the first time, you're like, come on, let's get through this Hobbit stuff. I want to get back to Durin and Numenor and all that. But
especially
it's like,
week to week, it's like, it's like if I was reading this book, I would have skipped ahead a chapter to see to check back in with my favorite storyline and then gone back later. But
yeah, it's like I only have an hour this week to find out what happens, and I've spent 15 minutes with the Harfoots. Yeah.
No, yeah, absolutely. Like I think they took a risk with those sequences, and they're not going to work for everybody. But yeah, I just felt like on rewatch, okay, I can appreciate what they're doing here. I think like Sadik has I think it's in the second to last episode, has one of my favorite lines of these sections, where he's like, "I'll get some provisions and get me stick. I'm coming with you, but it doesn't matter anyway because we're all gonna die." And that just makes me. It just reveals so much about him as a character, and how like you said, Jeff. At first, he's kind of like, the grumpy elder and who's against Tenori, and you don't really like him, but by the end, you feel for this character, and so it's meaningful when he dies, because you've gotten to sort of see him progress to a state where he's friendly towards a stranger and Nori.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, but a lot of those other, and Nori's dad especially, I re-liked. Largo. I liked him a lot better on rewatch.
Yeah. And I don't know if I said this before, but he reminded, like, when I first saw his character, and I didn't read up on the cast or much, but when I first saw him, I was like, that looks like Andy Serkis.
Kind of.
Yeah, he does a little bit.
And so at first I was like, could they have gotten Andy Serkis to come back? But as I watch, I realized it wasn't. So I'm wondering if that was, they kind of cast that intentionally, or if it's just kind of a happy accident. But it definitely, he gave, just his appearance made me think, and even his voice a little bit, which I know his voice he can modulate. But he reminded me a lot of Andy Serkis. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely great casting all around for all the different parts.
Yeah, and I didn't know a lot of these actors, and I watched a good amount of TV in my lifetime and recently, and I feel like you see a lot of those kind of bigger name people, but I think I was only familiar with, and I didn't even recognize Elrond, the Robert Arroyo, from his appearance in Game of Thrones, which is all I would have known him from. And then
okay.
And then Valindil, Isildur's friend, is in NCIS Hawaii, and aside from that, I don't know that I knew these people are actors and have acted, but I just didn't really recognize them from anything. So it's always a nice surprise to kind of see, like, they get some, like, maybe lesser known people and just get catapulted, and just they get launched into stardom through stuff like this. So just the cool side there.
And they've all done so incredibly too.
Yeah.
Like, I haven't been disappointed by anyone's performances. I've been blown away by, like, pretty much every actor.
Yeah, and that's so great. I think it's great to get relatively unknown actors in these parts, because a lot of them are going to be playing iconic characters, who many of whom have been done before in the Peter Jackson films, and who are going to be compared by fans to previous performances. But I just think it helps them as an unknown actor, and I think it kind of helps them inhabit the character better.
Yeah, I think it helps viewers too to be able to become immersed, because if you had, like, Jack Black playing, Gil Galad, I think
that's an interesting image.
That's the first thing that came to mind. But if you had a really well-known actor who's known for a certain type of role, like if you had Johnny Depp, who's kind of an Edward Scissorhands, Jack Sparrow kind of guy, trying to play a new role, I think it would be a lot harder to immerse yourself in the world of the story. And so since there are a lot of faces that we don't know yet, that made it a lot easier. And now we have a whole bunch of new actors that we love. So I think that's really
cool. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's kind of, and this isn't really a dig at the MCU or anything, but one of my problems with Marvel movies is that everyone is so, like, they cast these recognizable people, and sometimes it's hard for me to imagine them as the superhero character and not as the actor who's playing them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so I'm really glad that they chose that route, a different route with this show, to use a lot of these lesser known actors who are just phenomenal talents, and I'm sure are going to go on to do a lot of great stuff. But I want to move on at this point to, I think, what is the central storyline of this season that if it didn't work would have broken the whole season, and that is the Galadriel, Halbrand, Numenor arc. And I love the Numenor stuff in the first watch through. I thought it was great. I thought they captured the look and feel of Numenor perfectly. I loved a lot of the characters that were in Numenor. Elendil's probably my favorite character in the show, just because I think Lloyd Owen, the actor, just captured him perfectly.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there on Elendil. Loved him.
But yeah, just this whole segment of Numenor and Galadriel and Halbrand being, sent there, and that catapults their whole return to Middle-earth is really the central storyline, because as the main character dynamics of, Galadriel and Halbrand, who we find out later is the Dark Lord himself. What do you guys think of the Galadriel-Halbrand relationship and how that develops over the course of the season?
I don't know. A lot of me is very torn, because you can tell that they wanted the audience to think of this as at least somewhat potentially romantic relationship by the way that they were kind of leading you in that direction. I know a lot of people have said they didn't notice that, but I really feel like that's what they're doing, especially when you look at the marketing. And so I felt like that was kind of a weird choice. But I really do like, the more I've dug into different quotes, I've seen a lot of people tweeting about different quotes from Unfinished Tales or different things about how Sauron kind of saw Galadriel as his chief opponent. And so it's almost like they're equals in a way, even though she's an elf and he's one of the Maiar. So they're not really equal, but they're kind of each other's match. I thought it was really interesting. I still don't know how I really feel about it, just because you have the whole Celeborn issue, and then you have the whole thing about how Galadriel wasn't deceived by Anatar in the books. And then she's very clearly deceived by Halbrand in the show. A lot of it seems like they wanted to go a certain direction, and they kind of set themselves in this direction, the showrunners. And then they kind of kept running into different obstacles and didn't really know what to do as they were going in that direction. I don't know. It's kind of puzzling to me. I really liked it. Like, if I were to just watch this as a show unrelated to Tolkien, I really liked the whole relationship and the way it went and the way it ended. And I think the potential for what's going to happen in the coming seasons, I really enjoyed the whole thing. But viewing it as this is Galadriel and this is Sauron, I still feel a little bit weird about it. But I think the way that the reveal was done was really cool. In the last episode, it just kind of still left me feeling very weird.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the case for a lot of people like us who know the book lore. I think for people who either just know this world primarily through the films, or who are more casual fans, will probably be really into this storyline and be like, oh wow, this guy was Sauron and he and Galadriel, had this whole relationship and stuff. I think that's going to work for the more casual audience, but yeah, for people like us, it's kind of weird and unsettling. And yeah, I definitely would have written, if it was me in charge, I would have written those parts very differently. But I do like the sort of idea of Sauron being this person who maybe at first gets past Galadriel's defenses, but then later she just shuts him out and she's just like, no, there's something wrong with this. There's something wrong with you. I feel like if they had done that, that may have been more faithful to, what is in the material. And, but yeah, I definitely think it's an interesting relationship. And it was funny watching through those segments again. I almost thought that they did too good a job of hiding that he was Sauron in some instances. Like what you said, Jeff, when he's alone by himself, he's not doing suspicious things. He's just doing ordinary things. I think the one instance where it's kind of weird is when he's alone by himself sleeping on the ship and he's just awake. And I think we pointed that out in an earlier episode where we're like, oh, evil never sleeps. He's kind of like, he's a Maiar. He doesn't need to sleep and he's just laying there. But I feel like they could have done more to kind of signal to us that he's not human or he's different in some way. Jeff, what did you think of this whole of how they slowly brought out Sauron and revealed him to us?
Yeah, so obviously I was on the King of the Oathbreakers bandwagon, which we know now is not Halbrand is not that, but it did surprise me because I kind of up until the last episode, because as soon as in the finale when he says think of it as a gift, I was like, okay, it's Sauron. Up until then, I was definitely not thinking that. So I think they did well with kind of misdirecting and leading to all various speculation. I am curious, and I want to kind of get a flashback episode or something where we see, because we first meet Halbrand. He pulls Galadriel out of the water, or is on the raft that pulls her out of the water. I'm curious if those people and that monster, if they were even real, like, or if it was some kind of, illusion that Sauron cast. And if they weren't real, why was he there? Or even if he was by himself, why was he there?
Right.
So there's definitely some missing, or I would say not missing, but some unfinished stuff there that I'm hope we get to see at some point. Because there was also the conversation with him and Adar down later where Adar says, I killed Sauron. So did Adar kill someone who looked like Halbrand, or did Adar kill who he thought was Sauron, and then Sauron took the form of Halbrand? I don't know. There's definitely questions I have for the rest of the series, and maybe we'll get an answer, maybe not. But I did like kind of the overall arc they took Halbrand on, and even the relationship. I'm glad it ended up being him, and it kind of made his flirting with Galadriel make a little bit more sense, and her kind of responding to it, because she as an elf and flirting with a human, it's not, there's been very little of that in Tolkien, very little kind of crossing of those races. And so I was kind of hoping, don't want Galadriel to be like, oh, she falls in love with a human, and then has to settle for Celeborn. So
no.
Or I guess at this point has to, when she had fell in love with Halbrand, and then turns out Celeborn's alive, and we get some kind of love triangle situation. So I'm kind of glad that we've kind of cut that off, and so I'm glad that part, or that kind of aspect of it, is done. And I'm curious how much we'll see Galadriel and Halbrand or Sauron kind of meet up again. Because as far as we know, she kind of goes off to do her own thing and build her kingdom, and Sauron is more known for his conflict with Numenor, and then the Last Alliance, obviously. So I like them together as kind of playing off of each other. So I do hope we kind of get to see them. Maybe if he's taken captive by Numenor, we see Galadriel come back and get some more verbal sparring back and forth. So
a kind of reunion would be interesting.
Yeah, I have a feeling they're going to be continuing their relationship, however rocky it now is, just because of how good they were together, and how much the audience seems to have really enjoyed their different scenes and their relationship. Like, I have a feeling this is kind of going to be something that continues through the rest of the series, or at least part of it.
Yeah, and in fact, Kaitlyn, I wanted to ask you, because I saw you engaging in some discussion on Twitter, because there's been some people who have said, like, oh, Galadriel ruined Sauron's redemption arc, that he was good. He really was good. He was going to help Middle Earth, and she it's her fault. He turned back to the darkness.
She could have fixed him.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that whole train of thought, I guess?
I think that he saw her as a vehicle to more power. And I think that Sauron knows deep down that good is more powerful than evil. So maybe he thought, if I can get on the side of good, that is my opportunity to have more power. even though I also think he knew that, like, in the end, he's not going to have the strength of will to be good. So maybe he was thinking, well, if I can get Galadriel to like bind herself to me in this way, she's good. So through her, I can be good. And through that, I can have power. So I kind of think that maybe that's where he was going. And maybe he did have some good intentions. But I think we all know that ultimately, no matter if he was, I don't think he was repentant. I think he was like, I'm going to choose to be good because it will bring me more power. And in the end, he would have corrupted Galadriel, and then he would have kind of ended up ruling on his own. And something that's really interesting is the actor who's playing Sauron, he's given a bunch of interviews kind of answering these questions. So I think that those have been really insightful too.
Oh, that's cool. I'm going to have to take a look at those. What I thought was interesting, like to your point about where he's trying to choose good because he thinks it will bring him more power. He has these sort of quasi good intentions. Rewatching the first episode, one of the first lines of voiceover that Galadriel says is nothing is evil in the beginning, which is, I believe from the books, that's a line from Elrond where he says the full line is nothing is evil in the beginning. Even Sauron was not so. And so at this point, like he's already been evil. He's been working for Morgoth, but he's trying to put his past behind him, but he still has this worldview where I need everyone to listen to me. I need to dominate stuff. The only way to fix things is by being in control. You know, he has that. Adar says Sauron wanted to bring all the realms of Middle-earth into perfect order. And I also just think that he kind of proved, like you said, he wasn't he was sorry, but he wasn't truly repentant because he didn't want to do the hard work that repentance entails. Because as we know from the Silmarillion, you know, he tries to surrender himself to the Valar. And Eonwe, the Maiar, tells him, well, you've got to come and present yourself to the Valar and face judgment. And Sauron's like, I don't really want to do that. Instead, what I'll do is I'll assign my own sentence to myself. And that sentence is community service. I am going to do community service and fix all the stuff that I've broken and harm Middle-earth, and I'm going to do it my way. And anyone who gets in my way of doing that is an obstacle, and I'm going to get rid of them. So it's like he's trying to do the right thing, but his ideology is so twisted and broken that it's bringing him back to the darkness anyway. What do you think, Jeff? Do you have any thoughts on this?
I mean, it's hard to say it better than y'all did, but I mean, yeah, he's. I was just thinking, it's almost like he's like when, you know, to bring it back to our faith for a second. It's like when you go to confession, you're saying the act of contrition. You're you know, because a lot of people that I've known outside of Catholicism and even some within tend to think, oh, you need to go to confession because you know, you did something bad, you need to go, and then you don't need to go anymore. But it's really it's about the relationship between us and God. It's not about saying I'm sorry so that I get something. It's saying I'm sorry because I want relationship. So as you kind of said, like he didn't want to come back into relation with Valar and with Iluvatar. He wanted to you know, he wanted to say I'm sorry because he thought that's what he had to do so that for himself, not for himself and everyone around him or everyone, you know, because everyone he could impact. So yeah, I definitely think he decided he was going to set his own penance rather than he thought I'll just say 3 Our Fathers and a Hail Mary and be good to go rather than, you know, rather than having trying to come up with a penance or thinking of something that could actually, you know, help him repent for his actions. So
no, he's not trying to make restitution, which is what real penance and being sorry for your sins is is all about. He's not trying to make restitution. And if he is, he's only trying to do it on his own terms, because the whole plan of enacting the contingency plan to create Mordor was his plan. Adar just adopted it. So I don't see how this is quote unquote fixing Middle Earth or healing it or making it better. So it's like he still has all these different ideas that are just contrary to his stated motives. So it's almost like he's of two minds, which is funny because like the Greek word diabolos, from where we get devil, it means the divider, the scatterer, and he's always kind of sometimes working at cross purposes to himself, like Sauron or Morgoth in a way. And yeah, I just feel that but I find that interesting. I find that he's an interesting character in this show, because there's this idea out there, which I really hate, where people say, oh, in high fantasy, a Dark Lord is not an interesting character. He's just pure evil and has no motivations. And what I liked about this show is that they gave us a Dark Lord who was conflicted and who has interesting motivations, an interesting character. You see why he's doing everything he's doing. You don't agree with him, but you can see the sort of thought process behind it and what he's trying to accomplish. And I just thought that was a really interesting take on this type of character, especially because in the Peter Jackson movies, he's just a giant eye. And in the book, you never really see him. You don't get a sense of Sauron as a character, at least in the Lord of the Rings trilogy anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, before we could talk about Galadriel and Halbrand forever, but at the
it's
top
my
of
favorite topic.
I know, right? At the top of the episode, I mentioned that the Elrond Durin storyline was probably one of my favorite parts, and I just loved the acting all around in that. And I'm interested to see where that goes next, because it ends at a very interesting point. You have Durin, who is disowned by his father, and we know they're eventually going to get mining to the Mithril again. But I wonder how early they're going to do that. Do you guys think that's something we'll see next season, or will they put that off? Because I don't know how much time compression they're doing. What do you think, Kaitlyn?
I really hope that they aren't going to unleash the Balrog and have it destroy Khazad-dûm, because that's a Third Age event. And I'm really holding on to hope with something the showrunner said at Comic-Con. They said someone had asked them about Third Age events, and they said, the Second Age is so vast, I don't think we'd have any room to fit Third Age events. And I'm like just clinging to that line, that quote from them for dear life. Because like at this point, I feel so tired of them changing things that I feel are unnecessary. So I wouldn't put it past it. It might work within the story itself, but I'm kind of still like holding on to my copy of the Silmarillion for dear life with this one.
It's so weird, right? Because they've shown us the Balrog. So it's kind of like Chekhov's Balrog at this point. If they don't use it, people are going to be disappointed and say, well, why did you show us that?
When they showed it to us in the main trailer, it was so cool. Yes, because you have the trailer, you think it ends, and then you see this Balrog. And when we saw it at Comic-Con, like, people were flying out of their seats cheering, like there was a huge response. And so for that scene that was literally all we saw of the Balrog in the whole season. I thought that was kind of a bummer. And then I think of the animating team, the CGI team who had to create that Balrog for what? Like, are we going to see more of it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Especially if they decide, well, that's a Third Age event, so we're not going to use it. And it's weird because we know that the Durin, who is the reference to in Durin's Bane as a name for the Balrog, is Durin the Sixth, not Durin the Fourth. So they kind of have a problem there too.
Right. So it's hard to see where they're going with that, but I'll be patient because I feel like they they've earned some of my trust. I with the whole Sauron thing, I think they really, really understand Sauron very well. So I will be patient and I will wait to see.
And they seem to understand dwarves really well. Some of my favorite sequences in this series were giving us these insights into dwarven culture, even when it's fake, like when Durin makes up the whole story about the table. just him talking about this made up aspect of dwarven culture I was like on the edge of my seat listening to that. I'm like, yes, give me more of these details. This is fascinating. I just loved all of this insight into their really fascinating culture. It kind of reminded me almost of like in Star Wars from The Mandalorian, where they gave us all this stuff about Mandalorian culture, or in the Book of Boba Fett, where we got to see the culture of the Sand People. And I as a former anthropology major, I am really into that stuff. And I was just eating that up. Jeff, what did you think of both of the dwarf sequences in general and the looks that we got at Khazad-dûm and in its glory? Like, we've only ever seen it on screen in its decrepitude.
Yeah, no, I love that was definitely a close. It's hard for me to rank these storylines because there are things about them I like, and like in certain characters I'm like, might be my favorite character, but I like the storyline better. But they're all very, closely tied in terms of, how much I like them. But I love the dwarven storyline, loved Khazad-dûm, and I mean, Durin and Disa were just a great, they're a great couple.
Oh, that was great. Yeah.
Like just thinking of, I don't think I said anything in the episode we did it on, but when they're talking about how hard-headed his dad is, and Disa's like, yeah, he is, and then he starts to make a joke about her mom, and but he cuts himself off because he knows if he goes, even if everybody knows he's joking, he knows, you can't take that too far. So
you just don't go there. Yeah.
So I just really like the culture and seeing all the stuff we got, and I definitely look forward to more. And I mean, his friendship with Elrond was great. And yeah, so funny confession for me. When the trailer came out and people were talking about the Balrog, I'm like, where is this Balrog? I don't see it, because I kept stopping when it said Amazon Prime. And so I was like,
you're like, oh, it's over.
I was like,
it's like a post thing. Yeah.
And I rewound the trailer, and I would try to pause. I'm like, where is this thing? And I was looking up stuff, and finally I figured out, it's like a second after the trailer. But
well, that's really annoying that there's now quote unquote post credit scenes in trailers. I think the only thing that's more annoying is when they put those little sizzle reels in front of trailers, the trailer before the trailer. I hate that.
Yeah, but as far as the storyline goes, so I'm almost wondering if we'll see the Balrog kind of, because I was almost wondering because we see more when Mordor gets blown up, or when the volcano blows up to make Mordor, or I almost wondered if maybe that's kind of what awakened the Balrog, and he's kind of sensing the return of, a former, I guess, ally or former boss, because the Balrogs they're also Maiar, like Sauron, like the Astari. They're of the same kind of class of being. So I almost wonder if we'll see, maybe not see the Durin's Bane part in the show, or at least in this early part of the show, but maybe see the Balrog kind of sneak out of the depths and see what's going on in Mordor, and maybe become an ally of Sauron, or some other kind of secondary antagonist of some sort. I don't know that that's going to happen, though. I definitely have a feeling that they're going to do the whole Durin's Bane thing in this show. So I don't think it would bother me if they did, because I know I'm kind of less of, the lore isn't as, it's important to me, but it's not like I'm okay with changes. But so I don't know. I think it's going that way just because of it being a show, and they've, like you said, Chekhov's Balrog, they brought it up, so now they have to use it. But it'd be, if they did something different with it and did it in a different way than we're expecting, because that's kind of how they've done with the shows. They've kind of set things up and we're all kind of all in one way, and then they do a twist or do a misdirect or something else. So but yeah, the dwarven stuff, I hope we see a lot more of it, see a lot more of Moria and it's, yeah, like you said, in its glory. So I would love to see some like big smiths, seeing the dwarves kind of in their element of crafting and the whole. I mean, I love the singing. I forget what they call it, but the singing.
Oh, resonating. Yeah,
resonating. I thought that was really, really cool. Just a really cool aspect, which I don't think had been in any of kind of the works. So I hope they just expand on that and continue to build that, because that definitely was one of the races we've seen the least of the kind of the good races, and we're not counting the orcs, who it seems like we are getting some culture of in the show. So
right, yeah, I definitely think that it's almost like they've set it up to where they want to use the Balrog, because they have this thing with the Mithril, and Durin the Third, the king, doesn't want to dig for it. Durin the Fourth is very gung-ho about digging for the Mithril. So there's that idea of the dwarves dug too greedily and too deep and awoke the Balrog. So yeah, it's like they're setting things up, but yeah, that's true, Jeff, where they have misdirected us before. So I'm definitely interested to see where they take this storyline. And especially because now kind of Durin the Fourth status is up in the air. So it will be interesting to see what happens with him in the future. I just hope we get more Durin and Elrond next season, and more Disa as well. I like those three characters interacting together. I just think that's great. And I was with Elrond, I was especially pleased that we got heavy references to both his brother Elros and to Eärendil. That was huge for me. I wanted them to do that this season, and they definitely delivered on that.
Yeah, and we could definitely, I think you or one of y'all said we could potentially see a flashback with Elros using the same actor, kind of the founding of Numenor, which I think would be really cool.
I would really like to see that. Yeah.
And I mean, if we saw a flashback to Eärendil, he's one of my favorite of the kind of Silmarillion characters. So that would be I don't think we will but that would be really cool.
I don't think they can use that.
Not without the special permission. They'd have to, and it seems like they're they kind of have probably done all the first stage stuff they're going to do. So
I would love any flashbacks at all. I just think when they do throw in the moments back from the first stage or even before then, I would love to see how Adar came to be who he is, how Sauron came to, maybe fall under Melkor's dominion. I just think any more information that we can get on these characters and how they came to be the way that they are would just be so cool.
Yeah, I think that's something I'm also definitely interested in. Anything that gives us more insight into these characters. And I've been referencing Star Wars a lot tonight, but that's what a lot of the new Star Wars media has done so well. Like, Clone Wars, and now currently Tales of the Jedi is on, giving us backstory elements about certain characters. Things about them that you didn't realize and that totally explain their motivations as characters. I think there's a lot of potential in this series to do that with characters we think we know so well from the Third Age, and giving us a lot of very interesting, backstory stuff with them that will just, make them even more fleshed out characters. In terms of new characters, I think this next storyline is pretty much all new characters, and that is Arondir, Bronwyn, and the Southlanders, which, for me was kind of tied almost with the Harfoots, as when the first time around I was I liked Arondir, but some of the other stuff I wasn't too keen on with this storyline. What did you all think of the Southlanders? And especially one thing I did like, though, was the Southland's transformation into Mordor. That was a great idea.
I think that it was actually really well done. And for being made up and pretty much entirely out of original characters, I thought it was really able to get me invested in their characters really quickly. And before the show had aired, I thought I was going to absolutely hate the Arondir and Bronwyn thing. But like by the end of it, I was like, this is fine. Yeah. I'm fine with this. I do feel like it'll probably end with some kind of tragedy. But whenever that happens, I'll welcome it. But I'm also not mad right now about it. And that surprised me because I just thought Arondir was such a cool character. He was so elvish, especially in his love for trees. And then he was just so caring for the people of the Southlands. And I thought it was really cool to see him kind of step into this father role for Theo and kind of trying to counsel him. And then I thought Bronwyn was really courageous and very heroic. Just all around, I thought even like Waldreg, he was kind of this guy that you love to hate, but he was really well done. He was super cool. We had Rowan, Theo's friend. His acting was incredible. Just like everyone brought their full heart to that storyline, and I was just really impressed by all of it. And it was, I don't know, I thought it was great.
Yeah, at first I thought I was gonna hate Theo. I was like, teenage character, this is, but he really grew on me over the course of the season, and he really expands and grows as a character. Again, the acting was just spot on. I liked his whole, conflict of like, what do I do with this power I've discovered, this weapon? But I like that he's loyal enough to his mother and his community that when given the chance to join Waldreg, he doesn't take it. Mm-hmm. And that was sort of
really is a good kid.
Yeah, that was the moment where I'm like, okay, I am on board with you as a character. And I actually liked in episode 7, The Eye, where they paired him with Galadriel for most of the episode. I thought they had some interesting interactions. And so I'd like to see more of Theo in the future.
Yeah, I like Theo too. And like you said, at first I was like, oh, he's going to be the kind of the annoying character that is either going to, turn into a villain, which he still might. If we want to speculate, I'm now that we know it's not Halbrand, I'm kind of thinking it could be Theo as the king of the Oathbreakers down the road. Just because, especially if his mom is kind of the queen of the Southlands right now. Queen of those people, which I guess that's all the people there are. I don't know. But if she's kind of the leader of this area and gathers, and it kind of passes to him eventually, especially because the Isildur's still out there in Mordor.
Right.
So maybe they kind of become friends, and then eventually, Theo betrays him because we've seen him already betray for someone he loves, like his mom when he told Adar where the orcs where the sword was hidden. But I like the storyline too. It was a little at first. I was like, okay, what's the deal with this? But it was like many things with this show. Like it's something new in a world that's been pretty well established. So if it's like something new, what's gonna, is this gonna be good or bad? And I think we all tried to approach it with an open mind, and I like the storyline, seeing kind of the split in the Southlanders of some are going to go with, some are just going to say, well, our ancestors fought for Morgoth and Sauron. So, how can we be any different, not trying to, fix their own lives, but just saying, well, we're bad, so we're going to stay bad, even though they have a choice. You always have a choice in that kind of with them. So, seeing it turn into Mordor was just, I watched that sequence again and was just a great visual, and definitely look forward to seeing how that develops. And as we kind of, because they're going to have to populate it with some more people, more characters, and seeing if there is kind of going to be a King of the Southland situation, or if they're going to kind of be how they're going to be, fighting. Are they going to fight orcs? Are they going to kind of try to just leave altogether? So I'm very interested to see, like I said, all these storylines. I'm invested in them, and I want to see more.
Yeah, one thing that really interested me as a history buff was kind of the relationship between the elves and the people of the Southlands, because it's almost like the same. To me, it reminded me of the Allies occupying Germany at the end of World War II. Because to the average Allied soldier, they're like, well, you people are just all Nazis. Like they didn't differentiate between Nazis and ordinary Germans. I mean, the average soldier wouldn't be. So the way they kind of treated the people, especially when in an early scene, Arondir is speaking to the Watchwarden, and the Watchwarden is like, it's not about what these people were, it's about what they still are. To him, these people are still the same people who served Morgoth. It's kind of like that they're all Nazis kind of mentality. And that whole relationship between an occupying power and the occupied was something very interesting, and that I kind of wish we would have gotten more of, but that we only had 8 episodes, so they had very limited time to kind of explore that. But I thought that was very a very fascinating aspect of that, and I think we got a lot of that in microcosm, but with Arondir's relationship with Bronwyn, that he sees past what they were and what maybe some of them still are, like Waldrag, to what these people could be. And I think that's a very Tolkienian and a very Catholic too theme, that you're not defined by your past, and you're not even defined by the person you still are. You always have a chance for improvement. You always have a chance for repentance. So I think that's a really great aspect of the whole Southland story arc.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious to see if, because they left off they were at a old Numenorian colony, and if we see Numenor come back, it could be kind of a situation that, well, the elves left, but now we have Numenor coming in to try to occupy, and could lead to some tension and set up there for the King of the Oathbreakers or whatever storyline, along those lines. So, definitely that was definitely an apt comparison, and how some of the occupying powers like the West Germany kind of became very very Americanized and Westernized, and then East Germany became communist and became very follow the lead of the Soviets. So you kind of follow, in that kind of a situation, you follow you follow the victor. And so, right, which could be a good thing. We could see the people kind of be elevated by the Numenorians, because they were kind of didn't really have a lot left after they had to flee their homes, and didn't have much left. So we could see that in a good way, hopefully. But I have a feeling, since we know where that Numenor, where that storyline ultimately will go, that Numenor kind of becomes more of the occupying power, more of the empire, and you're their subjects.
And that's a great segue, because in terms of what happens in the future, I want to get your guys' thoughts on predictions for next season, your hopes, your fears maybe, and where you think the story is headed next. So Kaitlyn, let's start with you first.
So I think we will see the Dwarven rings being made at some point. I know we've got to see Halbrand returning to Mordor, so he's probably going to have some kind of face-off with Adar, where Adar will probably die, unfortunately. I think he's one of the coolest characters, so if he has to die, can he wait until the end of the season? I would just love to get more time with Adar. I think he's so cool. I think we're going to have to see Galadriel is... she's just been dealt like a massive blow. Even if her relationship with Halbrand wasn't romantic, like he was probably her best friend other than maybe Elrond, and Elrond had just sent her off to Valinor. So they had some issues there. Like we see even when she wakes up after Mount Doom erupts, like the first person she calls for is Halbrand. So like to lose this friendship or relationship, whatever it was, has got to be devastating. So she's probably going to have to be going through some kind of healing process. Maybe she'll be reunited with Celeborn. I think I know we're going to meet Círdan because the showrunners have said that he's confirmed for season 2. Okay. So I don't know what that's how that will fit in with everything. And then I hope that we would see Celebrimbor's relationship with the dwarves, because it's really all been Elrond and the dwarves. So I that's kind of my guesses of things that we'll see. They seem to be forging the rings in the order of the ring poem. So we had 3 rings for the Elven Kings this season. So I'm guessing we'll get the 7 in season 2. And then I know we're also going to see Sauron just being like a mean, evil guy, just based off of the interviews that I've read. So that'll be fun. And I feel like they might have done too good of a job making Halbrand a sympathetic character. So hopefully in season 2, we will get over him and see him for the bad guy that we're not supposed to sympathize with. Right. Because that's been a real like weird moment for me, because I really, really liked Halbrand. And then it's almost like I'm in Galadriel's shoes. Like, wait a second. I was rooting for the Dark Lord himself.
I think they wanted to do that to
and
viewers.
Then it's like, what does this say about me? Like, am I okay? Do I need to go to therapy? Like, what's wrong with me here? So hopefully in season 2, we get to see, like, he's very bad. And I hope that will be good to see.
So what about you, Jeff? What are your theories for season 2?
Yeah, so I think we talked about Círdan the last time, so I'm excited about that because he's just kind of a cool character from the Legendarium. So I don't know how they'll kind of bring him in, but as far as I mentioned I would love to see a flashback, like I said, of Sauron, seeing how he kind of arrived to the point we meet him, and see kind of, was it all an illusion, or was it, was he randomly with these people, or what was the kind of the purpose of all that? And I think it's a good bet we will. So I have a theory, or my theory is kind of we'll at least see some of that even if it's not a full episode, maybe just kind of interspersed with another episode or something like that. And we'll see, like I said, Isildur is still out there. So we'll have to see him get back to Numenor at some point. But I think because we talked a little bit about Elendil, and he was one of my favorite characters as well this season. Just great, I just love the casting was great. The actor just put so much, like, you could tell there's a lot of, gravitas behind him. And he's both kind of sad and tragic, but also heroic and hopeful. So they mentioned Inarion, so hopefully we'll get to meet Inarion and kind of get more maybe details as to why there seems to be a little bit of a rift there. And I'm wondering if it has something to do with Elendil's wife getting killed. I believe they said she drowned. And then his daughter's there as well. So it'll be kind of interesting to see that family dynamic as they kind of grieve, and then Isildur, meets back up with them at some point. And just seeing where
his sister saw she's up in the Palantir room. So
that's right.
That's a whole nother layer to that.
Yeah, and just seeing kind of where Numenor goes in the next season, because we've, the queen is blinded, so I could see her kind of becoming more of almost like a seer-like sage kind of character, kind of distancing herself from ruling, which could lead to Farazan to kind of take the reins of power, and ultimately kind of become the crown himself as king, or marry her, the queen, and then take over in that way. So I don't know if that may be more of a season 3 situation or end of season 2, but and then definitely more dwarf stuff, whatever it is. I'm happy here for it. I don't know because I can't remember if they said if Prince Durin had brothers or something.
They mentioned he had a brother.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe we'll see. Yeah, so I think we'll see kind of his family dynamic and maybe having a kind of a conflict with his brother and his father. So definitely something to. Definitely want to see more of that, and just anything more dwarves. I'll definitely take it. And then I know we didn't really speculate much on where the Stranger, Meteor Man, and Harfoot situation, but I'm curious to kind of see how much of that we see this season. If it's because, like I said, if it's just them two traveling, I don't think that's really a compelling story unless they're kind of meeting people along the way. So. I think we've all kind of speculated maybe they're going to Rune and they're going
right,
but we don't really know much about Rune and what and any of that place and the people. So I want to know, will they kind of play into the storyline of the ultimate storyline of Tolkien of the Legendarian and Middle Earth, or if it's kind of going to be, is he just a kind of a blue wizard we haven't met before going off on an adventure, and we'll just kind of but I feel like all these storylines are going to come back together at the very end. So I don't know how that looks with him and with Nori right now. Maybe they're going there to try to find, they think they need to find some kind of power or something. Maybe I'll have some other speculation on that, but definitely curious to see how it all kind of comes together.
I have one theory about that they may introduce a new secondary villain in the next season having to do with Rune, because we know that the three, whatever they were, the Weird Sisters, the Maiar, whatever they were from Rune. And there's a throwaway line in Numenor where Queen Muriel mentions something about runic emperors. And I'm wondering if they will introduce the Easterling Lord Khamûl as a new secondary villain for the Stranger storyline, because we know he eventually becomes the second in command of the Nazgul.
Okay,
that would be really cool.
Yeah, the main ring wraith under the Witch King, and to introduce him as a mortal man at first who is interested in sorcery and the dark arts, someone who may be lured into receiving a ring of power, and who may be a kind of Morgoth worshiper who set himself up as emperor over the East, especially if the Stranger is one of the blue wizards. We know that one of the blue wizards has a name that translates as East Helper. And it's funny because Nori keeps insisting that the Stranger is here to help. So I just wonder if we're going to see them try and, I don't know. It would be hard for one wizard and a hobbit to liberate the East, but they could be doing so. But who knows? There may be an object they need to find. But I just think somehow that Khamûl may be introduced as an antagonist for their storyline. And if that's true, I would be really excited about seeing that, because we don't know anything about him other than his name and that he's a Nazgul.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of room there for exploration.
That'd be really cool.
And actually, I did remember something that I thought of that I could be wrong on this, but I think I looked it up and it looked like that this is possible. Were the elves, so in the Silmarillion, is Cuvanen where the elves awoke? Isn't that in the East?
Yeah.
Possibly in Rune. So I almost wonder if maybe that's what he's somehow going. Maybe it's tied into the decay of the elves to go back to kind of their origin, which I believe in the Silmarillion, the Cuvanen it was destroyed or lost in the War of Wrath against Morgoth, but maybe that's what they're looking for, some kind of source of primordial power that could, help solve whatever the kind of the decay of, the elves and the decay of Middle Earth. Although maybe now that they have the rings, that's not as much of a concern. So, but anyway, that was just, I had thought of that recently. And so I don't know if that it's probably not much there. I think your stuff is probably more likely, which would be really cool to kind of get. I mean, exploring more of this world that we don't know is always great. So
yeah, and that's definitely what I think the strength of the show is, and what the potential is for more interesting stuff along those lines. Which leads me into my last question for you guys tonight, and that is, this has obviously been a huge success for Amazon. Despite all the controversy and kind of, nerd rage that has surrounded it, it's been a huge success. They invested so much into this show. They took a gamble, and I think it paid off. And so do you think that there is the potential for spin-offs of this show? Will they try to create a Middle-earth streaming cinematic universe out of The Lord of the Rings?
Part of me hopes not, just because that's so cringy, but I would also love it. The more the more time we get to spend in Middle Earth, it's so wonderful. It's been so cool and such a gift to be able to go back in this way. I never thought in my life that I would see the two trees of Valinor depicted on the screen, or that I would hear my kids talking about Silmarils because they learned about them in a TV show, or that I'd be talking to my neighbors about the Lord of the Rings just casually, So that has been so wonderful and so cool. So if they do want to do spinoffs, I'd be okay with it. I just hope they do them tastefully and that they don't overwhelm us. I don't want to be seeing like a movie every year, or, 5 things happening at once. And I just don't want them to cheapen Tolkien. And I think it kind of, that eventually will happen, just because that's what happens with any adaptations. But maybe if they just do it carefully, it won't be so bad.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited. I'm always excited for more content, and yeah, I mean, I hope they don't kind of stretch it too much where they're just pumping it out for money, because it makes money, they're going to make it. I hope I hope there's always good intentions behind the creation of whatever spinoffs or other content we get. I think I'd read that there was, when they were kind of shopping around a Middle Earth TV show to various places, there were a number of pitches and that were heard or that were given about from all kinds of different peoples. There's like the young Aragorn show, or about his father. So it doesn't even have to be like, I could see them doing spinoffs of this show in particular using characters or characters, but I could also see them going and using different people in the same world, but in a different time. So I don't know. I mean, I definitely hope, I would love to see something kind of dwarf centric, down the road, whatever that may be, whether it's in Third Age or beyond, someone who was mentioning the Fourth Age, or we were talking about the Fourth Age. So it would be very cool to see that. I don't know that we'll go into the Fourth Age in any kind of content, just because I feel like the ending of the Return of the King and the kind of the appendices of that story are kind of pretty final. So going beyond that, I don't think I'd want to see like the elves have left. What are the humans going to do now? But I hope, but anything kind of in between, I would love to see. So definitely here for it.
Yeah, I think we had mentioned in an earlier episode that a spinoff about the War of the Dwarves and Dragons would be really epic.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, if you gave me an unlimited budget, I would probably do a Angmar War series, just because I think the Lost Kingdom of Arnor and how it splits into 3 petty kingdoms and the influenced by the Witch King. I just think that's a really cool story arc, and it's in the appendices. They have access to it. So if they want it, like, I don't know if they're allowed to make other shows besides this one, but if they want to set something in the Third Age, the Angmar War is there, and it would have a lot of potential for be a more conflict centric kind of Game of Thrones almost style thing. Like, not in terms of
Don't say that.
I don't mean that in the terms of objectionable content. I mean that more in the sense that it's about warfare. It's specifically conflict based, and that there's a lot of factions, because in the Angmar War there's a ton of factions, and there'd be a lot of ways to weave in characters that we know, like Elrond and Glorfindel. Yeah, Glorfindel, one of the elves. He takes part in the Angmar War. So there's all kinds of great, character moments. And of course, you would have the Witch King as the primary villain, and he's kind of a fan favorite. So I just think there's a lot of potential there. But who knows what we're going to get in the future. I know that the rights to Lord of the Rings were recently acquired by somebody else. So I don't know how much more they can do.
Yeah, I want to say it was like a Norwegian company, or like some company in Europe acquired them, so they could potentially make films or adaptations. So,
well, I think Prime only has the rights for TV series, so maybe someone else has the rights for films or something like that. And
of course, Warner Brothers is going to release the animated Rohirrim movie in a couple of years.
I'm excited for that. That'll be fun to talk about too when it comes out.
Absolutely. Yeah. So do you guys have any final thoughts on season 1 of The Rings of Power?
Nothing here. Just I really enjoyed it. I know you said you don't typically rewatch things. I'm a big rewatcher. Like, I've seen Mandalorian I don't know how many times, and I just finished rewatching it again. So I'm definitely a rewatcher of these kind of shows, especially in between seasons and leading up to the next season. So I'm sure I'll watch it at least probably twice more, probably like the night before it comes out, the new season comes out. I'll be binge watching this in a day just to kind of get myself in that mind. But I really loved it. And so it's been a fun journey.
Yeah, I really, really appreciated the series. I feel like it's easy to be critical just from sitting at home watching it, thinking, oh, I would have done this different. I would have done that different. But I feel like I still don't know the full story. The showrunners know what they're doing. They have the full story in their minds, and they're kind of drip feeding it to us with each episode. And so it's hard to be patient and wait and see what happens. But I really, really liked the show. I think there's room to improve with season 2, and I hope that they'll kind of take the lessons they've learned from season 1 and carry that on with them. But like, the cast has been amazing, the visuals and the music, and there's just so much to love. Yeah, like this, it's
Where the Shadows Lie has been on repeat on my Amazon Music app.
Yeah, and if you just compare it to anything else that's on TV right now, I just feel like it's miles above any other shows, especially in terms of something that I can watch with my whole family. Like, it's a fantasy world, a beloved story, and it's something that I can enjoy with my family. So I just think, even though it's not perfect, it just was a really, really good show so far, and I cannot wait to see where they go with season 2.
Okay, and on that note, that's it from us. We'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make this show possible, including Claudia S., James K., Alfredo B., Ed B., and Mary V. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give help us to continue to create the Secrets of Middle-earth and all the shows here at StarQuest. You can join them at sqpn.com/give. So we'd love to hear what you think about season 1 of The Rings of Power. You can let us know at sqpn.com/Middle-earth, or on our Facebook page, or on Twitter, or you can send an email to middleearth@sqpn, or visit our channel on the StarQuest Discord server at sqpn.com/Discord. We'll be back next time, where we'll be doing a special holiday episode discussing the best gifts for the Tolkien fan in your life. Until then, Kaitlyn Facista, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Middle-earth.
Thank you for having me. It's been wonderful.
And Jeff Haecker, thank you as well.
Thank you, Thomas.
And once again, I'm Thomas Salerno. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Middle-earth on StarQuest.
There's another show on the StarQuest Network you're sure to enjoy, The Secrets of Stargate. Find it wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/Stargate.